La barba. C'è barba lunga quando ti sei rasato il tuma volta. People, what I just said in Italian, this is the word of the day. The word of the day is la barba, which is the beard. And the example I gave was what a long beard. When was the last time you shaved? The word of the day, la barba.
In smoky rooms where deals are made, loyalty the ace he's played. A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve.
Brothers and sisters, welcome back. Welcome back to the Friend of Ours podcast. This is a limited edition series hosted by your main man, Duke Loves Rasslin. And of course, the legend himself, the man who's giving us Italian lessons now, the one and only, the Don of Wrestling, Big Vito LoGrasso. What's going on there, Vito?
I'm doing fine. I hope everybody enjoyed that. Um, that's something I haven't said in a very long time. And I used to say it all the time because if anybody knows about my karate in WCW, that was my late great Uncle Ross. He used to be a barber, but he also used to be a karate expert when I was a kid. And that's another story and another time. But when I used to do that karate, I used to say Uncle Ross Karate. So that's a happy thought. I figured I'd bring him up today. Duke, how you been? How's everything going?
You know, we are enduring snow here in wonderful Boston, Massachusetts. What a surprise. It's snowing in January. Just dealing with that. Other than that, life is good, man. I can't complain.
Yeah, I was at the gym yesterday. I went to the jacuzzi after. It was a little chilly, but I was there. I was the only one in the jacuzzi. The pool was empty. The jacuzzi was empty. I had free reign of the place. So it's been a little chilly in Florida, but we're getting through it. We're managing. We're managing.
Uh, must be nice. Listen. I got a question about that. Since you want to sit here and show off, well, I just told you I'm dealing with snow, and you're over here hanging out in jacuzzis and what have you. What is it about this whole gym tan and all this club and all this other stuff? What is it about the American Italian culture where hitting the gym, getting a nice tan, hitting up the clubs? Why is this such a big thing?
It's a lifestyle. It's the way you do things. In the summertime, especially if you're at the Jersey Shore or if you were back in Staten Island or Long Island, or any club area. Gym tan laundry. That thing has been around for a long time. When you're going to the gym, you're going to the beach to get a tan. Your laundry's done. You're looking good. You're feeling good. Then you go out at night and show off the goods. And your fresh whites, and you're dancing the night away, and you're drinking, having a good time. What do you get up and do the next morning? You go up, get in the gym, work on the bod, take a shower, hit the beach, show off the bod, get a little tan going, have a couple of drinks, go back, take a little snooze, then get ready for a night of dancing and good times with the ladies.
And this doesn't get old. This is a lifestyle, right?
It's a lifestyle. I lived it for a very long time. Especially in the summertime, it's gym tan laundry for me, all the time.
Unbelievable. That just popped up in my head. I'm like, wait a second, because all that Jersey Shore stuff that we saw, the heyday of MTV and what have you, and that was a big thing. That reality show, there was some truth to some of that stuff, huh?
Yeah, but you know what? That stuff has been around before the Jersey Shore, and that stuff was the basis of the show. So when you talk about gym tan laundry, that was done years before Jersey Shore even became a thing. And I was probably one of the biggest Jersey Shore guys you ever met, especially the way I used to carry on, and go to International Mail where I used to buy all my clothes, and and go to specialty shops for shirts, clothes, suits. I mean, there wasn't a rock I left unturned to have the greatest fashion in Jersey City. I mean, Jenkinson's my favorite club of all time. Jenkinson's down down at the Jersey Shore.
My God, international mail. You're going all the way back with that one. I haven't heard that name in a long time, brother.
There's a cologne I still wear that was very rare back then that is called denim cologne. That is one of my favorite colognes. It's still around. Anybody out there goes to get denim cologne, you'll thank me later. Send a fruit basket. It's okay.
Send a fruit basket. Wow, I'll tell you, it's interesting to again when we talk about culture and all the different variations of culture because you have Italian, you have the old way of doing things going all the way back to the old country and what have you, and Sicily and all that good stuff there. And then you have the American version where there's still bits and pieces of back home, but a lot of customs are they were created and maintained here, and I think one of the things that I think of is the Sopranos, that TV show, where more than anything you got to see the Americanized Italian experience as opposed to what we normally see, which is most of the time it's more heavy handed about the influence of back home. The Sopranos was really about what's happening here. What's happening in Jersey and Philly and New York, what's happening here.
Right.
When you think about those distinctions there, is there something to that there is a different way of being Italian?
Well, The Sopranos brought out a lot of undercover stuff, or brought out the street version. If you like, we talked about on prior shows, the movie Gotti, was something, that was, you know, um, I would say probably the most authentic. Then you had Goodfellas, you had Casino, but I think the show that really shows where it starts from is Boardwalk Empire. And if anybody who watches that show, um, you get to see how things really started, down in Atlantic City, where you had, Philadelphia, you had New York, you had Chicago, you had real live mobsters like my uncle Lucky Luciano. You had a guy named Meyer Lansky. You had Frank Costello. You got Johnny Torrio. You got Nucky Johnson, not Nucky Thompson, like he's supposed to be pronounced in the series. But you had Mr. Masseria, and you had a bunch of other great characters, and Al Capone, who's probably one of the more famous people. Um, there's a guy named Frank Nitti, who's also another enforcer there, like Al Capone was. And then you have a bunch of other bosses, like Salvatore, Manzarino. And then you had Joey Bananas, Joe Bonanno, and, the La Casa Nostra Commission is something that has been going on from generation to generation, but the generations change with age and things are brought out in different ways. But the customs and the way of doing things still live today.
We've been talking about your uncle Lucky Luciano, and we've been talking about how he's been portrayed in different things and getting your insight in that. It's almost like you're in a time capsule to a certain degree, getting to see people act out real things that happened in his lifetime and what have you. One of the more common themes that we've come to realize through the years, going all the way back to the 1930s up to today, there are a lot of people within the mafia, the La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours, whatever you want to call it, who unfortunately or fortunately, depending on who you are, ended up flipping and actually telling on people and becoming state's witness or what have you, cutting deals with the government, wearing a wire, ratting, stool pigeon, whatever you want to call it out there, folks. You have this whole concept of we have customs, we have a way of life, we have things that we got to do, we got to stand for something. You should never break these rules. You have that, which is more old school. But then you got this other thing where no matter what anybody says, so many of these guys have flipped and have become informants. And if they lived long enough, they're now on YouTube telling the whole world about it. Talk to me about that, Vito. From your perspective and your opinion, what are your general thoughts about that whole concept?
Well, when you look at the history of the mafia and you look at what it was and what people can relate to, when you look at Boardwalk Empire, you look at it as that was a real time with real gangsters dealing with real issues like the liquor industry, the ladies of the evening industry. Politics were very, very keen. People who were in great power, got together, and that's when you had territories, and that's when you did things in a very sophisticated way. Everybody dressed in a suit. Everybody was in a tie. Nobody had, you know, anything other. They didn't have any other attire but to look like a businessman. And when you look like a businessman, people took you seriously. Now, when it comes to rats and people ratting, everybody has their reason why. But when you look at John Gotti, and this is something that I'm very fascinated about, stand-up guy, just like Lucky Luciano was a stand-up guy. Um, Al Capone, like I'm just naming some guys who were stand-up guys, especially like in Boardwalk Empire. And to the day he died, he stood for what he believed in, and they said, "We'll cut you a deal." He says, "No, I'm a man's man. This is me. You're going to accept me for me. I'm John Gotti, and that's it." Now, John Gotti's right hand man, Sammy the Bull Gravano, um, he went against Italian customs, and he did something that a lot of people don't do. But when you look at the Gotti family, you look at somebody who didn't want to be part of it anymore, and that was John Gotti Jr. John Gotti Jr. never took a deal. He never compromised his values. He just said, "I want peace. I want out." Never said a word about anything else other than, "I love my father. If my father loved you, you were gold. If you hurt anybody in the family or anybody my father knew, you better watch out." And you look at John Gotti Jr. and he stuck to what he said. And if you watch the Gotti movie, you get the last meeting, and he said, "Son, you do what's best for your family, and you do what's best for you." Then John Gotti went off. That was the last time they spoke. He passed away. John Gotti Jr. made the deal, and this was done respectfully, not out of fear or anything like that. Wanted to be with his family. Something John Gotti did spend his time with the family, but he also spent a significant time away from his family. And that's something that John Gotti Jr. learned from his father. So there are different ways to do things. And when you talk about people ratting or going against La Casa Nostra or doing things, There's reasons why people do these things. Do you want to spend 50 years in jail? No. Do you want to live the rest of your life in maximum security, having bread and water? No. Well, then cut a deal with us. For some people, it works. For other people, it doesn't.
It's an interesting thing because, again, you have people who swear we got to abide by these rules and we got to keep it this way, and then you find out that a lot of these guys are out there telling on everybody else in order to try to save themselves. So then it turns into a wow, okay, so this is when they
You
say
know,
crime doesn't pay. What do you say to that? You know,
but back when you look at what we're looking at, the Boardwalk Empire, and I bring this up because, and this is not a bad thing, guys. This is how it was back then, and this is something for everybody to. If you're a historian or you're somebody who lived during that time and you're listening, you know, Italians were with Italians, Jewish were with the Jewish, blacks, African Americans were with the African Americans, um, the Irish were with the Irish. There was a disliking between each culture. Each culture was represented by a main guy, and you had to respect, everybody's boundaries back then. You respected it to the best of your capabilities, and nobody wanted to go to war with anybody because at that time the liquor business was booming, and you had to go through so many different channels to get your delivery, and you had to make deals, and politicians were involved. Then they had the drug industry where you could distribute your drugs and go from city to city like they portray in Empire, Boardwalk Empire, and it's the same thing, and nowadays, like you had the five boroughs in New York, you had, you have Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, the Bronx, you got New Jersey, you have, New Hampshire, there's so many different avenues to go to, but you're talking to five boroughs. That's how it was with them guys too. Everybody had their own, and the heads of the five families, the heads of the five boroughs.
we're fascinated by these things. It's ingrained in culture, and obviously we see it in movies and TV shows, online. Everyone has the clips where they show all the different things, and it's just interesting. It's interesting to peel back the layers a little bit, and especially talk to somebody who this is a part of your life. This is what you saw around you, and to a certain extent, you were in some places, so your perspective on this stuff is fascinating, and that must be why our wonderful listeners keep pouring in every week, trying to hear more and learn more. It's a really interesting thing there. Um, I didn't realize, Vito, how much of an influence Lucky Luciano had over The Godfather, especially Godfather Part Two, the trilogy, the movie series there, but especially Part Two. There were so many parallels to Lucky, and things that he had been involved in, that the book and the movie had lifted and fictionalized to a certain degree, but they were using real life situations like what he was going through in order to portray some of these things. So, first of all, shout out to your lovely wife, Noelle, who called that out and pointed it out and really pointed me in a direction like, hey, this stuff is really deep into Lucky's life here. And it's like, oh, wait a second. Okay. So let's start from this point here. The restaurant scene where Michael Corleone, he, after getting smacked around by the cops, by the police chief, now he's in the restaurant having dinner with the police chief, and he's having dinner with the rival boss who attempted to kill his father and all that good stuff there. Michael excuses himself, goes to the bathroom. There was a gun that was taped underneath the toilet bowl ahead of time. So Michael was just able to pull that out, comes out of the bathroom, and he blows those two guys away, drops the gun, walks out. This was a loose telling of when Lucky Luciano was responsible, him and his crew were responsible for whacking Masseria in order to
Right.
take over his seat. And ultimately, that's when they officially formed the five families and what have you. What are your thoughts on the fact that your ancestor, Lucky, had that much influence where literally one of the greatest movies, a lot of people say is the greatest. I feel it's the greatest movie of all time. Portions of that movie were about his real life and things that happened in his real life.
Duke, I got to tell you something. The more I watch, the similarities between me and my uncle are uncanny. I never had an opportunity to meet him, but the way he flies off the handle, the way he jumps, and the way he's ready to throw down and go down. If I had to say, pick Vito from back then, that was him. Without any hesitation. And anybody who was around me back then, like if you tried to hurt my family, I was off the handle. If I was gonna fight you, I jumped up and I was ready to fight. And if you came to a club I was in and you did something, you got jacked up. But when it comes to the stake in a territory, like Lucky did, and the way he handled his business, if people don't know, Mr. Masseria, was against Lucky and tried to take things from him. And there's a couple of scenes where he's speaking in Italian and says, "Hey, what are you doing with these guys here? You should come with me and I can make you some money." To which Luciano replied, "Why? So you could have your hand in their pocket and my pocket?" So Masseria seen the potential in Luciano. Always told him, "I'm watching you. I'm watching you." Eventually, Luciano started to work for Masseria, and then it became too overbearing to where there was an assassination of Mr. Masseria, where they had to sit down. He excused himself to go to the bathroom. He then proceeded to the bathroom. His guys came in, did the job, and they all walked out of the bar. Now, in the movie The Godfather, Mike Corleone is having a sit down, and police captain is there. And back then, it was the same concept. They patted you down. They made sure you didn't have nothing. The thing with Duke mentioning the gun behind the box where you go to the bathroom, so Michael can have a weapon when he came out to take care of this guy and assassinate this man. That's the way you did business. And if you had to take out somebody, that's how you take them out. It goes to show you, like, like I explained, like, a couple of episodes ahead before. I'm sorry, that I had a fight with an actual hitman from the mob. I didn't know who he was, but when push came to shove, I mean, the guy was 300 pounds, a big man, and this guy, from what I understand, was a killer, killed people, murdered people. And when it came to fighting on the street, I got the best of them. I went back to this guy's house to square it off. They thought I was half nuts. They said, "Vito, you're freaking crazy." I said, "No." I said, "I'm going to straighten this out." I said, "I don't want to be looking over my shoulder. I want to be looking over my head. I want to squash this. I want it finished." And then, a couple weeks later, you know, they found this brother in the back of a trunk. They foreclosed on that guy's house. He was no longer heard of or seen from. I never knew why that happened. I never asked no questions, but he was gone from the neighborhood after that fight. So these things really do happen, guys. And if you're with the right people and you're doing the right thing, these things, take care of themselves. I mean, Duke, I know we've spoken in private about a lot of things. And for the fans out there and the listeners, you know, Duke is an ally of mine, is a friend of mine. I know him a very long time. And we've had some very deep conversations. And Duke knows about my history. And Duke could tell you, when I tell him these stories and we talk, and it's not even storytelling, it's just a conversation. He's, I guess, Duke, the best way to explain it is like, you're my friend, you're listening to me, you're being compassionate, but your shock value because I'm not seeing your facial expressions has got to be off the charts after we speak.
Well, definitely in the beginning. Definitely in the beginning because it's been a long time now, like you said. So I'm used to it and I get it now. But in the beginning, it's like, wait a second, this guy who we've seen on TV and playing these characters and doing these things here and who's in a couple of movies and whatnot. Wow, you lived through that, you survived that, you had to deal with that. It is shocking, it is fascinating, and it is a reminder that you never know who you're dealing with. You never know what people are carrying on a day to day basis. You don't know a person's journey. So it's very important not to assume too much and not to think you know too much because you could be very wrong. It could be very easy to interact with a Vito LoGrasso and just be like, oh, this guy, he's a softy and whatever, and he just likes to have a good time and he's not serious and blah blah blah. You could very easily take that opinion, and I know a lot of people have, and then they find out the hard way. Hold on a second, this is a complete human being. We all have more than one thing going on inside of us. But when you hear about Vito's family history, and when you hear about how he grew up, where he grew up, and you think about the time period and what was going on around him at the time, you can hear this guy say, hey, I had to throw hands with a guy and come to find out he's a friggin' mafia hitman. And it's like, it's so hard to even process that. Like, what? Literally a guy who's known for making people disappear. And Vito had got into a fist fight with the guy and won. And then had to go back to the guy's home and walk into the home. The door gets shut. So at that point, the guy has a legal right to kill this man, technically, and get away with it, right? But you were able
No, you're right.
to straighten it out, shake hands as men, and you're able to walk away on your own 2 feet. And thank God, because not long after that, the guy's brother disappears. He's found in a trunk, and then this guy has to go get out of the neighborhood and whatever for whatever reason. It's not for us to know why that all went down the way it did, but it's a gentle reminder that wow, brother, you lived through some crazy stuff.
There was one guy I was friends with, and we're talking about this stuff. You talk about guys who turn state's evidence. I had a friend, and his name was Anthony Capo. He used to hang around with a guy named Jimmy Red, and they were connected to the Bellotti family. And the guy went away with, because of the pizza connection. When pizza connection was over, he did a little time. He came back. They gave him a little something. His father-in-law ran something down in South Beach, Staten Island, and he too big for his britches. Always used to shoot off at the mouth. One time at the Atlantis, they had to sit down. He was running his mouth. Joe Bellotti had to slap him up, and then in front of everybody. Wise guy slapping another wise guy. And anybody who knows, Joe Bellotti, he is a small guy, but he is a tough son of a bitch, just like his brother and the rest of, you know, his sons and nephews who were my buddies. And, um, when he had this bodyguard with him, his name was Jimmy the Red. And this Jimmy Red was a rough customer, man. You could, he was tough. And there was just this animosity between us. Nothing to say that we didn't like each other, but Anthony and me were friends. He was Anthony's right hand man. He knew that I can handle my stuff, and Anthony can come to me at any time and say, "Hey." And he always, just looked at me, and I looked at him in a different way. where like if we had to walk off and just square off one day, it would have been the fight of the century. Because in the back of both of our minds, and I could say this candidly, did I want to try this son of a bitch? Yeah, because like he just had something about him that was like, and I know he had the same feeling about me, but we were both boys of Anthony. Anthony wound up turning state's evidence and went into witness protection. Never in a million years would you have thought this. Never, never. It got around the neighborhood. He left his wife and two girls, and the father-in-law was up in arms. He ratted on everybody in the neighborhood. Me and my buddy Vinny Salenti still talk about this today, about the old days, because you know, we were all part of this. But when he turned himself in and went, not to go to prison again, shock, shock. Just you couldn't believe it. No way, no way did he do this. And I think with everybody who has gone that way in life, like I said, you have reasons. I guess shock is the best way to put it.
Shocking indeed. Jeez. Was there any backlash from that? The guy doing what he did like that?
Well, he left his wife and he left two girls. Um, his brother, who was the total opposite, was a nice guy. You know what I mean? And like it was just, I guess, for everybody where we were in South Beach, Italian neighborhood, there was you never would think guys would like turn like that. And then things started to crumble a little bit. Some guys got pegged. Some other big time guys got pegged for some real estate stuff. So you don't know how much effect that this had, but you never seen him again. And he wasn't a bad guy. You know what I mean? We played softball together. We played football together. When he needed me to come to bat for him to go do stuff, I went with him. He was my friend, and he helped me out when I needed help, and I helped him when he needed help. But you know, shock is probably the best way to explain it.
What happens to the family when you have a guy who flips? When you have a guy who turns around, he starts telling, and now people are being put away because of things that he's revealed. Maybe he wore wire, the whole 9 yards there. I've seen it. I've seen people's family members get ostracized and treated badly because of
Yes.
something that their family member did. From your experience, number one, have you seen the same thing before? And number two, what's your philosophy on stuff like that?
The scrutiny that these people go through, because betrayal of La Cosa Nostra, betrayal of the Italian heritage, betrayal of your Italian customs is there is no coming back from that. The family is mortified and embarrassed because you live this lifestyle and you have this persona that you're an Italian representative, and you do things a certain way. Your house is a certain way. Your clothes are a certain way. Your cars, your lifestyle, your dinners. And then this happens. We can give Sammy the Bull Gravano, is very, does podcasts, and he tells his story. But when you watch Mob Wives and then you see his daughter on the show and she gets backlash for it, huge. I mean, your father's a rat. Your father did this. Your father did that. But you give her credit because you can say what you want about my father, but I'm going to jack you up. And there were times when she threw hands, and people have a lot to say, at that time, because you're held in such high regard, like John Gotti's Sammy the Bull. That's 1-2. And then when number two turns over number one, that's like the sacred curse. It's something you don't do. So when you look at the way she was scrutinized throughout that whole, mob wives, it's sad in a lot of ways. It's hurtful, and she didn't do anything wrong except that was her father. And there were a couple other guys who turned state's evidence on the show, I believe, who turned. And these are things you have to. What was the other one's name whose husband turned? One with the black hair. I'm sorry, they all have
Ooh,
black.
and that poor lady, she went through hell over that because
Yes,
the husband he flipped. So the husband's name was
right,
Junior, if I'm not mistaken, but you the
right,
Renee Graziano, right?
right.
The black hair,
Yes.
her her guy that she was with, who used to work for her father, ended
Yep.
up ended up being somebody who told, basically. And the
Now
crazy
you look
part
at
about
her.
that with Renee is that she was given uh, Karen Gravano, who's Sammy the Bull Gravano's daughter. Renee used to give her a hard time over
Yeah.
Sammy. But then Renee's guy ends up being a stoolie. So how does that work?
Let me tell you something. Now you've seen a strong personality, and then you've seen somebody whose personality wasn't as strong, and you've seen Renee fall apart because her father was her hero. You know what I mean? And he went down, but then she was in love with her husband, Junior, and her husband turned state's evidence, and like the whole, she doesn't have a father, she doesn't have a husband. There she is. So there's no help from one side, there's no help from the other side. Everybody's keeping back from you. So it's kind of like you're left out there on your own. It's not like when somebody goes away. If you go away for the family and you say, okay, you're going to go away for 3 years, but don't worry, your family will be taken care of. There's food on the table, the rent is paid, you got money in your pocket, you did us a favor, we're going to take care of your family. That is, that's the one of the customs, that's the respect. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, this other side of life where people, turn state's evidence and they flip on the guys. It's part of the game. There's always a chance. You got to watch. You got to be, you got to be aware. You got to know who you're around. It's just like the old Italian custom. Don't sit in the middle of the restaurant. Go sit with your back against the wall. This way you can see who's coming in and there's nobody who can get you from behind.
That's a fact. That's a fact, and something that people in the know to this very day, they make sure that they do that. I mean, even on public transportation, myself included, I would prefer to sit in the very back, like the last seat, for no other reason than to make sure that I can see the entire bus or the entire train. I want to see everybody coming on and coming off. I want to see things develop before it really pops off, so I have time to react. I know where all the emergency exits are. I know where all the exits are, and I can account for just about every single body that's on that form of transportation, bus, train, or whatever. And it's one of those things that you learn at a young age from being around, people who that's what they preach. Hey, always have your back to the wall, never have yourself exposed, always keep an eye out, always look for the exit and the entrances, pay attention to who's coming and going, blah blah. Like, these are things, these are lessons that are instilled in you, and it's about nothing other than survival. you know Even if you're not the target, you could still end up caught up in something. So
Yeah, but
because of
Duke,
that, be
tell
aware.
the people now, Duke, tell the people why you really sit in the back of the bus. We know out by you, there's a half price sale if you sit in the back. Come on.
Is that what it is? Is that what it is? Because I'm a cheap bastard. Hey, that could be it too. You never know. You know?
Could be it too. I mean,
But wait a
I'm
second.
still waiting all these years. What? I'm still waiting all these
Yeah.
years to have a dinner with you. You know what I mean? And you're looking
Oh,
to
give
take
me a
me to
break.
Applebee's 2 for 20.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, Applebee's. I'm not going to take you to Davio's or one of these places here. It's going to be Applebee's. That's right. Listen, I want to
No,
go back to something for.
let your mother find out you're going to take me to Applebee's. She'll have you.
Oh my
I'm
God,
telling
this
you, let your
guy.
mother find this out.
This guy, he's killing me here. I want to go back to something though, because I think we just kind of surfaced an interesting point though.
Go ahead.
Again, you have somebody like Karen Gravano, who she was pretty young when her father got caught up in all that stuff, right? First of all,
Right.
he was the most notorious mafia hitman. He was the boogeyman, this guy, right?
Yeah.
And part of
Yeah.
him becoming state's witness, he had to cop to a whole bunch of murders, which he did. So he had to admit, yeah, I whacked so and so, I whacked so and so, I whacked so. Like he had to eat all that, right? So you have the whole aspect of here's a guy who we now know for a fact he killed my family member, he killed my friend. You know what I mean? So we got that part of it. But then on top of that, he ends up flipping. So now you got a situation where, wait a second, now it's like double worse because now it's no longer about this thing of ours. This guy's playing by his own rules, right? So a lot of
No.
people mistreated Karen, who had to actually leave. I think she left the East Coast. She moved down to Arizona or something like that, and she lived there for a while because of
Yeah.
all this, because of all the issues with her father. Now on the flip side, you got Renee, who was just living the lifestyle, and this is what she knows. And even though family members getting locked up, going away, things happening, your friends in and out of trouble, and all that good stuff, but this is the lifestyle. It is what it is. When the guy that she loved flipped and it would became a fact that that's what he did. And then some were speculating that he had something to do with her father being arrested. She lost her mind. And I saw a recent interview of hers where she talks about the fact that she's finally put down the drugs because for a while she was self medicating with the drugs. But when you hear about these things that were going on in her life, you kind of understand why she was the way that she was. You don't condone it, but you understand it. But again,
Right.
she was one of the people who was giving Karen Gravano a hard time. And it's like, Jesus, look at how life is. You were giving somebody a hard time and encouraging other people to do it, and then come to find out you're pretty much in the same position they're in now. You didn't do the thing, but somebody close to you did the thing, and now everyone's looking at you funny. It's pretty sad.
It is pretty sad. And, it's something that, people today are more aware of. And you notice there is really no talk of mafia today. It's very quiet. And quiet is the way it's supposed to be. Quiet is the way it used to be. And if anybody out there who knows of history or is involved or anything, you can attest to the fact that there is no newspaper clippings, there's no advertisements, there's no nothing, just a bunch of TV shows, just a bunch of radio shows, just a bunch of stuff, you know, um, with nobody in the news, with nobody in the mafia, with nobody doing anything. Now it's quiet. La Casa Nostra is the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be an underground world. You're not supposed to know about these things. You're not supposed to hear about these things. And if something does happen, it's quiet.
Yeah, like they say, it's a secret society. All we ask is trust, right?
I'm in Florida. We don't hear. There's nothing going on here in the papers. I'm sure where you are and in the five boroughs, because I keep up on the news and there's nothing going on. Everything is very hush hush and quiet. Everybody knows their P's and Q's, and you go about and do your business.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that, and the feds have made it clear, they know that the mob is a multi-billion-dollar industry to this day, and some of the bigger families, and including the remnants of the Gambino family, they're pulling in billions per year off of racketeering and other types of things, prostitution, drugs, all that good stuff there. But you're right in the sense that there's no Teflon Don who's out there trying to be up in the newspapers being known for being a celebrity gangster. That ain't happening. These guys know better than that. And the few times that we saw it, whether it be on Mob Wives or what's the other one, the Housewives series on Bravo, right?
Right.
Uh, you when you had people who were out there flaunting the fact that they're mobbed up and they're living these extravagant lifestyles, a lot of these folks ended up getting pinched on tax evasion charges. It's amazing how many of them ended up getting in trouble. And it's for no other reason than you're on TV flaunting it in our face that you are this person who has essentially gotten away with something. And the feds don't like that, so it is what it is. But it is interesting, like you said, a lot of that stuff has changed and it's become so quiet over the past, I'd say, almost 10 years now, where that's not the end thing anymore. It's back to keep your mouth shut, you know, and that's just the way it is. So
I mean, when you talk about, Drita was a wild card. Carla was kind of calm, but she had some spunk to her. Karen Gravano and Renee Graziano, they were just, very, very, up forward people. Big Ange was probably the coolest and laid back because she was the most seasoned at it. And she was like, she went through all those phases and she just wanted peace and have a good time and everybody just get along. So when you talk about, Drita, she wanted to fight everybody and their mother. She wanted to fight Carla. She wanted to go with Karen. She even wanted to go with Renee, right? And then when Big Ange used to come around, Big Ange was the consigliere who wanted to settle everybody's business.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah,
it was a great thing because Ange was always like that. I had the privilege to hang out with Ange and get to know her, back in the day when I used to hang out on Staten Island. But then you talk about these other people who joined, like Alicia and Natalie, who joined the cast. And then they got into their own thing because one was from Philadelphia. I forget where the other one was from. And then um, there was a girl named Brittany who joined and a Marissa. And then, it just got to be bigger with some of the girls who were the original cast kind of got like, etched out a little bit to bring on new cast members to keep the show going. But it was a show you watched and was a show that was great, but it also had a lot of emotional scars from the lifestyle. And people, you know, this doesn't just go for the Italian mafia lifestyle or, being in the mafia. It goes for every lifestyle. Everybody's got something in their house. It was just brought to the forefront because we're talking about the Italian heritage and where uh, the Italian roots come from. And we talk about my uncle Lucky Luciano. We talk about Al Capone. We talk about John Gotti. We talk about Paul Castellano. We talk about all these people. But if it wasn't for all these people, we wouldn't have all these great shows.
great point. Including this one. great, great point. Great point. You know what's interesting? You brought up Drita. Drita was a wild card, and you talk about the fact that she was always ready to fight. She Drita's not Italian; she's Albanian. So I think
Yeah,
part of the whole issue with her is that She wasn't necessarily one of them. She just married into it, but she comes from a whole other type of culture that's similar, but has its own level of mafia and customs and things like that. And her being the only other in the group, let's just call it what it is, she was the minority in the group. That's part of the reason why she had to always be ready to defend. But she was hypersensitive about everything, so she was just ready to punch somebody in the face no matter what. Which everybody knew they just felt she was crazy because of that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, maybe that's part of what protected her. People just don't want to deal with her because they think she's nuts. When in the meantime, she was probably the most scared person in the room because she was always by herself.
But you want to know, in defense of her, and this is something like, and this is the truth, guys, right? Albanian people are very, very prideful people. And when you come at them, their first take is to attack and to be loud and to defend themselves. It comes with it being Italian, being Jewish, being, but being Albanian, she was just one step ahead of everybody else. And this is not about anything bad, because when you watch the series, she takes care of her children. She tries to love her husband. She tries to be a good wife, but she just didn't dig all this stuff that was going on. It was just a lot of drama. And you seen she was an entrepreneur, opened up a shop, and you seen that she had businesses, and she did deal with her husband Lee, and it was a lot of things that were going on that made her this monster, as to say. But if you take away all that stuff, she's a pretty level-headed chick.
Yeah, she would stand up. She would stand up. No question about it. I actually, quite frankly, despite the fact that she was always getting into scraps, I actually liked her a lot. I could understand where she was coming from, um, because I think a lot of people on that show were portraying, it was their real life. Let me make sure I'm clear about this. I'm not trying to disrespect you, but it was their real life. But I think that they were playing a role in real life because that's what they were taught to do. You got to be like this. I think whether we're talking about uh, Sammy Gravano's daughter, or whether we're talking about Drita, these are individuals who, this is who they really are, for better or for worse. They're not playing. Like, this is who they have to be. It's not a joke to them. This is their real life, and they're willing to go all the way if they have to as a result of it. You know, so it's interesting. The whole thing is interesting.
No, I tell you, and like when you look at their lives now, right? Occasional pop up of what they're doing, and how they look and how they're living their life and everything. But when you look at what they're about today, do you know what I mean? They have Instagrams, they have Wikipedias, they have Facebook. They got all the social media like everybody else. So it's not like they're living this silent life. It's just a quieter life.
I agree 100%. Vito, what's the best way everyone listening can keep up with you? Because you're dropping all these great gems here. What's the best way they can keep up with you no matter what?
Well, everybody, you can go to my website. That's bigvito.com. You can go to Twitter, TikTok. You can go to YouTube, my Facebook, at the Big Vito brand, right? I'm even on LinkedIn because I am an entrepreneur. Guys, it was great to speak with you today. I hope you enjoyed this show. Duke, take it home.
Duke Loves Rasslin on Facebook, on Twitter, Duke Loves Rasslin at gmail.com. As always, let me know what you think of the episodes. What do you want to hear more about? You got any questions? You need some tips on something? To have this kind of access is unheard of. So definitely utilize it there, folks. That's right. As always, be kind to yourselves and be kind to others. This has been the Friend of Ours podcast. We'll catch you next time, folks. That's right.
A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve. A mystery